blanket and some sunblock. It's time for lying on the beach on camera. Lois and Slade.
Welcome to another edition of Lying on the Beach. I'm Steve Greenberg with
Lois Whitman-Hess.
And our extra special guest today is Stephanie Slade. She is a homeschool mom of two, ages 5 and 8. This is her 4th year homeschooling. She helps run a large homeschooling group called Bridgeway Homeschool that supports about 750 kids. She's currently planning a Northern California homeschool convention that will take place in Rocklin, California this summer. And because we're talking about homeschooling, I've got to say I came from a public school background. And I have to say most of us people who came from who are outside of the homeschool world, we think of homeschool is for, I have to say, religious extremists, parents who want to indoctrinate their children in a very narrow view of the world. And I'm assuming we're wrong. Stephanie, help set me straight on what is homeschooling all about. And again, I think you really are going with a lot of folks who have a strong prejudice against the concept of homeschooling. So what are your thoughts?
I would say maybe 30 years ago, that was maybe the typical kind of homeschooler, the homeschooler that stayed home, didn't have a lot of social interaction. Parents did want to maybe shelter their kids from things of our world. But I would say that's not the typical homeschooler today. Most homeschoolers are really engaged in the community. Most homeschoolers have a lot of opportunity to take extracurricular classes that they wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to do if they were in public school. Yes, you are right that there are many families that are faith-based that want to be able to teach faith to their kids, and they don't necessarily get that opportunity as deeply when their kids are in public school. But would I say that that's the all-encompassing reason why people are homeschooling? I would say not. I would say a lot of it comes down to freedom as far as what you're teaching your kids. So curriculum choices. When you're in public school, it's a one-size-fits-all. And if you fall out of that one-size-fits-all, essentially you're kind of left behind. There's not really anybody bringing you up to speed. And if there is, it's probably not the best fit of curriculum for you. And so you get a lot of opportunity to pick curriculum. I mean, there's hundreds, and when I say hundreds, like so many curriculum companies out there, whether that be a religious curriculum or a non-religious curriculum. There's both. And then you get a lot of freedom in your homeschool day. I mean, that's one of the beauties is that public school, you're in a desk, for hours along the day, and essentially you don't have that in a homeschool environment. You're doing school, probably max 4 hours a day. And that's in high school. When you're in the elementary years, you can get my girls are in elementary. My girls are done with all their stuff in about an hour and a half. And so, mind you, that's kind of broken up throughout the day, but they get so much more opportunity to be kids and to play. And that's one thing. If you look at the research they talk about is that kids don't have enough outside time in today's environment. And so this gives them the opportunity to really be kids, to be outside, to play in the mud, to get dirty, to really be in their environment and learn what is true and beautiful and good, which at times when you're in a public school, you're not getting those things. And one thing I always like to ask people, because this is a great question, is when in our life as adults do we interact only with people our age? Never, right? I'm not just associating with people that are my age. I'm 36 or almost 36. So I'm not, just only with 36-year-olds. I'm talking with people that are in their 50s, in their 70s, people in their 20s. You're really interacting with all different ages. And when you're in public school, you don't really get that. And so you see a lot of times public school kids maybe are nervous to talk to adults, or they'll talk to you, but they won't really make eye contact with you. It's completely different in the public school setting in the homeschool setting. These kids are very confident and are very comfortable talking to adults because that's part of their daily world. They're out in the community. They help with budgeting, with grocery shopping, all of these things that, a public school child necessarily, maybe they help a little bit with, but not on the regular basis. That was a
So,
long,
no, so
a
Stephanie,
long answer to your short question.
Stephanie, I want to ask you, before you knew all this, what was the reason why you decided to homeschool your girls?
For me, it really was the freedom of picking the curriculum. My oldest is really bright, and she got into a couple of really great public but charter schools. And when I had reached out with them before she was starting kindergarten, like, hey, she's already starting to read. She already knows, a lot of her math facts. What kind of things are you guys going to do to challenge her? And they didn't really have an answer for me. They didn't really have anything to tell me that how they were going to challenge her. And that, like, off the bat was a little bit of a concern for me. And so, my husband and I talked about it. I come from a private school and public school background. And as much as I didn't think I was wanting to homeschool, I said, let's just try it. Let's just try 1 year and see how it goes. And that's what we did. And here we are 4 years later.
I'd have to say that, I had a little red flag that came up when you said that, they can finish their schooling for the day in about an hour and a half. And I guess I'm thinking, isn't there a lot missing then? Because, I went to school a solid day every day for my entire childhood and beyond. And, that was all jam-packed with stuff I needed to learn, whether it was, Shakespeare or typing or reading or math or whatnot. All that happened in school. If you're only getting an hour and a half, maybe they're getting shortchanged on some education.
I would say it depends on the age. Obviously, in high school and in older grades, you're taking on much more of a heavier load. Your class schedule is going to be more difficult, more time consuming. But in the elementary ages, excuse me, you're really focused on math, language arts, writing. You're starting history, but your history is, you're not going as in depth, right? Because their brain capacity and their to take that all in, it kind of just goes out the window, right? Charlotte Mason, who is a huge proponent for homeschooling, but actually the public school system really started after her teaching. She's a European homeschooler and teacher, and she says that kids' lessons should be no more than 20 minutes long. And the public school system originally implemented that, short lessons throughout the day. They moved away from that. And why, I'm not sure. But so I really try and keep my lessons 20 minutes. You got to think about it. At 8 years old, what's your, attention span as an 8-year-old? Probably about 15, 20 minutes in each subject. And if you're going beyond that, maybe you're starting to get a child that's really fidgety, really wanting to just check out. And you see that in the public school when you're trying to teach math for an hour. These kids are like bouncing off the walls, right? They're like, we need to stop. Like you're starting to see behavioral issues in public school when you have these longer lessons. And so Charlotte Mason really talks about short, concise lessons in lots of subjects, laying the feast for them. They're getting art, they're getting history, they're getting music study, they're getting composer studies. My kids do violin, so they get a really large feast every day. And some days are lighter days where it's like, it's a struggle today. We're just having a tough day. So we're going to focus on reading, math, history, and you're going to read to me. That's going to be kind of our core day. Like, we're going to make sure we don't skip out on anything else. Maybe science can wait till tomorrow. Nature study can wait till tomorrow. Nature journaling can wait till tomorrow. We're just going to do this today to make sure that we hit all of our core subjects.
But again, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I have good friends who are in homeschooling, and I know they love it as well. But isn't there like a missing piece of structure? I mean, in real life, when you leave the school world, you go from the structure of school to the structure of a job and work and whatnot. And here they've got this very fluid kind of schooling. And maybe that structure is being taught, and not only learning math and science and history, but you're also learning about structure, about sitting
Mhm.
there, learning it, doing this at a certain time. Things start at 8 o'clock. You've got to be there at 8 o'clock. Things start at 1 o'clock. You got to be there at 1 o'clock. All of that is being taught subliminally when you're learning that construct. By taking that away, are they losing that?
I think a lot of families have, time structure where we start at 9 or we start at 8 and we go all the way through lunch. You get one, break, you can go play outside for, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Most families have that structure, especially as their kids get older. That structure is for sure there because a lot of the work they're taking on is independent. They're on their, I don't want to say on their own at this point, but when you're in high school, you're starting to do a lot of these things on your own. And additionally, here in California, high schoolers have the opportunity to take dual enrollment classes. And so when I say that, that means, you are taking classes at a community college. And so you're taking your high school credit and you're getting college credit at the same time. You have to be very disciplined and have a very structured day to be able to take that on. The beautiful thing is, though, a lot of these homeschool kids, they graduate quite a bit early. Because they're taking those dual enrollment classes. And so they're graduating high school and finishing with their almost, I would say, a good portion of their general ed complete because they've been taking these dual enrollment classes since freshman year.
What about the cost? Is there a cost from your end, or does the state cover it because they're normally paying for the kids' education in a public school? How does that all work?
So that's a combination dependent on the family. So there is here in California, there's two options. You can either do it privately and file an affidavit with the state, where essentially all the costs and fees are put on the family. Many people do that here in California because they maybe don't want as much being told to them as how they need to do it, when they need to do it, XYZ. However, there's a large portion of people here in California that have a charter program, which is very unique to California. Most states are private. Most states don't have the charter option. There's only a few that do, California being one, and Idaho that I know off the top of my head, that's another. With that, your charter helps you with making sure you're meeting your state standards. So they meet with you every learning period. You have a teacher assigned to you who is an accredited teacher. So they're going over your work. You submit your work to them. And then they also deal with the attendance side for you. You do testing through them as well. So all kids in the charter program will do testing 3 times a year. So they get a really accurate read as where children are at. And typically, homeschool students are about 20 to 30% or percentile, over public school. They test stronger than public school kids. And many of them test better on SAT, ACTs as well. So the charter is really nice because it gives you kind of that guidance, especially for maybe a new homeschooler. I myself am with a charter and my kids receive charter funding. So we get about $2,500 a year to be able to go towards curriculum. And we get to pick that curriculum. So it's really beautiful. Obviously it can't be religious. If you're going through a charter, if you are with a charter, you can do religious curriculum, but you have to purchase that on your own. So you can do that. Those that are with private, they can choose either or.
Stephanie, how many students or children are in a homeschool program across the United States today?
Right now, the latest update that I just saw was 3.72 million. So almost 4 million students across the country. And from just data that we have here in California this year, and this was as of 2021, so last year. This year, though, in California, we've seen 110,000 new families move to homeschooling. So we see the growth is exploding. And we anticipate, especially here in California, to see more of that.
What's happening that it's growing at such a powerful rate?
I think parents have kind of realized some of the education that's being taught aren't in line with maybe what they believe or what they're okay with. And so they're choosing to take their kids, out of the public school system to make sure that they're not getting that. Essentially, I think that's one of the biggest reasons. I think the last 2 years has opened parents' eyes into what's being taught. Maybe parents weren't as aware before because kids are going to school. Well, the last 2 years they've been having Zoom calls, so they're hearing this stuff, and parents are, concerned. And I would say that across the board, from political stances, whether either side that you're on, there are people concerned about what's being taught in public school.
Okay. Do you know any like major personalities, that are, that were homeschooled that none of us know about?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a big list. So I'll share just a few from kind of like older days, right? So we've got John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, C.S. Lewis, the great writer, Charles Dickens, the great writer, Robert Frost, the poet, New Age people. So we've got Whoopi Goldberg, Taylor Swift, Margaret Mead. She's a education leader. The wonderful Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to the Supreme Court, Venus and Serena Williams, Condoleezza Rice, Ryan Gosling, Kirk Cameron, Justin Bieber, Justin Timberlake. So a lot of people that we wouldn't think were homeschooled. And there's a really great movie coming out that I would encourage everybody to check out, even if maybe they're not interested in homeschooling, but they want to learn more about, what it's all about. Kirk Cameron homeschools his children, and he has created a movie called The Homeschool Awakening, and that's coming out in June.
Okay, we will definitely see that.
I had one more question I wanted to ask, which was really about the responsibilities on the parents. I mean, in a typical public school education, your responsibility is to get them to school and then to, have cookies and stuff ready for them when they come home. With this, you're involved with every step of it. And for some parents who have 2 jobs, and, this may not be possible. So you must be a parent who is working out of your home or has the time. Or what happens to the parent who the parents are, a single parent or 2 parents who both have a job? How do they navigate this?
I mean, the beauty about homeschool is you make it work when you have the time, right? I know personally families, both parents work, they homeschool in the evening. That's just how they make it work. Or they homeschool on the weekends. And so you really have that flexibility to make it work for your family. There's a lot of people that are first responders, police officers, firefighters, things like that are homeschooling their kids because they don't get to see their kids as much when they're in a public school. And so this gives them the opportunity to have much more family time, and they can be involved with their education.
Stephanie, what do the students do during the day if they're being homeschooled at night? Who's taking care of them? What are they doing?
Well, I would say if they're in like a younger demographic, right, they're probably needing a babysitter, a nanny, somebody like that, maybe grandma and grandpa help with some of the schooling, but they can't take it all on. So it kind of depends on the family. But yeah, that's a great question, because I do think the younger ages, people are like, well, how do I make that happen? Who watches my kids? A lot of the times it's family, or a lot of people may have a nanny.
Well, certainly Lois and I both didn't reach our potential. And maybe it's because we both went to a public education. So who knows?
Well, this isn't Steve, it's amazing that you're saying that, because I wanted to ask the question, but I couldn't remember it because I was publicly schooled and I did not do well. So you made me think about it. Steffi and I had a discussion, and I told her that I was like one of the worst students known to mankind because I would sit down and then tune out. I could care less what that teacher, who most of the time I didn't respect, was talking about. So I went into fantasy land, and that's what I did. And I had a brother who taught me how to answer essay questions, so I passed. But I did not have any benefit. When a teacher was terrific, and I mean engaging, that's what I mean, I was like the A student. But that was very rare. So, so Stephanie, I don't know, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but definitely from having a longer conversation with her, I really felt if I was homeschooled and I had somebody paying attention to me and doing that big vision thing that I told you about, I think the other day, about don't bring me right to the textbook. Let's talk about the topic first. Give me an orientation, engage me. I probably would have done very well. And now I suffer because I wasn't homeschooled.
And poor Lois, it's been a horrible life for her, the poor thing, and has been nearly homeless most of her time. So if only she had been homeschooled.
So Stephanie, before we go, I want you to explain to a lot of parents that are listening to this, or parents to be, what are the steps? Where do they go to find out about homeschooling?
I think the first step for families should be hslda.org, which is Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And you click on your state and they tell you the options of homeschooling in your state. So you'll know right away once you click on your state, can I do it privately? Is there a charter option? And the next steps to doing that.
Great.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
No, it's a great information. We will definitely put that information in the
blurb,
the blurb underneath this podcast, and we really appreciate it. It gives us an insight. So many of us who only know people who've gone to public school and aren't friends with Ryan Gosling, which is a real shame. We are familiar with it. So for those of us, this is really enlightening. And Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Lois, do you agree? Are we set to go?
Oh, I could speak to her forever, but our listeners only have an attention span of 20 minutes.
Because they went to a public school, most of them, they really have, their brains are cooked at this point. So this is the most we can do for them. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate getting your side of the world into our little world over here. Once again, I'm Steve Greenberg with
Lois Whitman-Hess.
And we have been Lying on the Beach. So long.
Thanks, guys.